Cameron,
so we will
and
start
this
off with some
is
thoughts for you.
the Conduit. All right, you guys, it is Thursday night. We have another great show for you tonight. Today we have
Mark Boatwright Frost in the Resilient Communities.
and what's happening today, Mark?
Well, let's see. We're doing a workshop. Is that important?
Oh, I think it's absolutely important, critical.
We're going to be talking about imagination tonight. We're going to be talking about changing your perspective and seeing things other than what you expect to see. And we will be talking about asking the next question.
All right. Well, I'm going to turn it over to you. This is the continuation of the workshop series that takes place every Thursday evening. And so, again, there's plenty of space, so you should come out and join us. I will put the information in the chat if you want to contact Mark or myself, and we'll get you contacted in. So we'll get you connected in. All right, Mark.
Excellent. All right. So this is series one of the of 4 series of workshops. There are 3 workshops in each series. This is all about perspective. We've done 2 workshops on it. Now we're going to take perspective to a whole nother level. But before we start, we're going to talk a little bit about humanity, because isn't that what this is about? Yes. So as we think about humanity, one thing that we can all be assured of about humanity, even though it doesn't seem like it with the way the media and politics and everything else goes, is that humans are wired to be together. I mean, there's all kinds of layers of things that we put on that, but on its very core, humans are wired to be together. We're not wired to be alone. We do not thrive alone. We do not do well alone. Because when we're alone, we are in our own heads, and that's not a good place for us to be.
Yeah, man.
So, and we just got our coffee delivered, so that's a wonderful thing, because, you know, talking about deep thoughts requires either some really cool tea or some coffee. Okay, so when you think about communities and people being, when you think about people being wired to be together, you think about community and what that looks like. And one of the things we want to start off with here and change your perspective is we put a lot of things and labels on. Gesundheit. We put a lot of things on labels on communities and what restricts us for being in communities. We have communities based on our race. We have communities based on our religion. We have communities based on our politics. We have communities based on our upbringing. But is that really community? Or is that people getting together for a common thing that is not quite humanity? So, Camo, what do you think about that?
You repeat the question. I think I was following, but I just want to reiterate.
Okay, so we have all kinds of things we call community that are based on all kinds of artificial constructs. And I'm calling them artificial constructs. Other people will go, what are you talking about? You know, the fact that I get together in community with my alumni from Princeton, that's not an artificial construct. I went to Princeton and it's important to me. But is that a human connection? Is that a fulfilling connection?
I think that it certainly can be. I feel like my instinct reaction and to kind of go along with what you're saying is surface friends, you know, for I'm thinking about like surface friends where for years, you know, I would go to Seattle and dance like once a week, you know, and these are people that I would be able to see once a week. And I, you know, very much became friends with them, but it wasn't really, you know, I don't really know them, you know, until later when we actually got to spend time together as individuals. You know, it was kind of just like this thing that we did as a group. So I think I feel that, you know, unless you're really talking about some serious stuff that actually impact lives, like on a life or death situation, I kind of feel like it might not be as, you know, I don't really know how to word it, but
so, well, let's take that and so we're going to talk about asking the next question. And so I'm going to be mirroring that for you to some degree and playing that out. So you're talking about surface friends and that those connections were not deep connections. And I heard you say that they became deep connections or deeper connections when you were with one or two of the other people
Mm-hmm.
in connecting. Was there any particular, a bunch of questions come to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any particular draw to these people that caused you to dive deeper?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we touched base on this last week as well, where you can see somebody and you automatically feel that connection and you feel like there's something going on that you need to communicate further with them about. Whereas others, I would, dance in the same area and we didn't even get to know each other's names for weeks, and we'd see each other once a week. And yeah. So I think it's that we can share an experience together and we would understand each other. And that's where I would pursue that further.
Okay. So I'm going to shift just a little bit and we're going to do it a little differently than last time where I kind of asked a bunch of people. I'm going to stay with you for a while. Then we will kind of go on to other things.
Okay.
So as your experience with going to a dance group and then being drawn to a few different people and making deeper relationships with those people. First question before I go into the shift into another subject is, you stayed in touch with them and are you now in a larger group of people that you are all connected to? Did a community grow out of that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's become family.
Okay.
Yeah. And some are still surface friends. But I still love them. I still care about them. But I wouldn't reach out to them if there was an emergency. They're not top, but there are definitely some people throughout that group that I can, consider top, go to if I need help or if they need help, I'm there, so absolutely have created bonds with some of them over time.
Okay. Then the next question I have for this is that, or for that particular thing, I have to think about how to ask it. So you've developed this family. And would you say that you are a diverse group or do you all have similarities?
We definitely have similarities.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say it's very, but one of the reasons that they were surface friends for me for so long was because I couldn't relate to them. And now that I feel a little bit more that I can relate to them more, it's less of like a party scene and more of like, let's get together and have human connection kind of scene. That makes sense. It's less of a dance thing and more of a connection thing. Okay. Over the years.
So I'll ask you the first question I'm going to actually end up asking all of the group at one point or another is our premise is that we can get people tools that will help them reach out to their communities and neighborhoods, which is again an artificial creation. It just happens to be someplace they live. But the tools to reach out to their communities and start creating connections. Mm-hmm. Now, I agree with you. I think some of those connections are going to be surface friends and some of them are going to be deeper friends or deeper connections. But in order to build resilience, we need to get people in local regions connected.
Right.
And do you think that is a doable thing?
Absolutely. I feel like right now it's kind of hard because everybody has built a shell. They very much nested over the last year, so it's pretty hard to get out. And a lot of people have developed social anxiety, and they're afraid of coming out and talking to people, whereas they would normally be the first to be out. And I think it's absolutely doable because it's something that I do all the time, and it's definitely something that I have built in this community, just to begin with. So I absolutely feel like it is about weaving that web, though. It's about building that net so that we can all be supported by it. We're all just going to fall if we don't have anything to support us. But if we're all together and we're all working on it, we're eventually going to have something very supportive.
Excellent. Okay. So Terry?
I like your analogy of weaving the net. I like your analogy of weaving the net. Yep.
All right. So Terry, I'm going to start off with the same question, and I'm kind of interested in your take on it, because I know that that you actually have kind of a community of umpires, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about what that looks like as it developed.
A community of umpires. Well, we're all individually. We work our own pace, and we can choose what we want to work and what we don't want to do. So it's real easy on all of us to be able to sit there and around and talk about our lives and what we do besides softball umpiring. It's softball umpiring too. Yeah. And all of us do it. Most of us do it as supplemental income. So we all have that in common, and but we all also enjoy. Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to call you on that a little bit, because I know personally that you have a tremendous love of the game as well.
Yes. Well, of course, we all have. Who would not be an umpire if they didn't have love for the game? But there are a few of those umpires that are out there just for the money. But most of us who last 20 years, which I've been doing it over 20 years, is for the love of the game. Yeah. And connecting with the kids. I love watching the kids' skills grow as they play and practice. So, yeah, it's a nice community. It's definitely a nice community. I have a ton of fun. So what is the community we have as umpires includes the coaches and the players. Because, if you're a good umpire, those players will remember you.
And I remember you telling me stories on several occasions that you've watched a girl go through many phases and play for like many years.
Yes.
And you've watched them progress as they go through it.
Yes, I did a slow pitch. My last night at slow pitch this year, one of the girls I watched from, I think, 8 years old, and now she's in high school, and she knows me, and I go, "Hey, Mel, how's it going?" And her dad was playing the slow pitch game. So people, and because of the camaraderie of the softball.
Now I'm going to take this back to something Camo said. She just some of the people that she knows and developed community with as surface friends, and some more deep relationship, and then into family. Are you finding that that's the case in this as well? Is it an organic process that you can identify that way, or would you say it differently?
I would say it's the same. There's some umpires I got close to, especially John, who's the head of our organization in Kitsap County. His wife recently died, and it just took us all by surprise, and it was a very sad thing, and it hit me hard. So yeah, we are family quite a bit. Yeah.
And you got each other's backs.
Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah. I mean, it's like one of the guys had hip surgery, and I'd already done 5 games, and John, and I was only expecting to do 5 games, and John goes, "Oh, well, you're going over here to this field to do 2 more." And it was because the guy had hip surgery, and he's doing the field with a cane. So I run out there to replace him, and that's 2 more games to help him out.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Camo at the end. Do you think that our goal of creating connected communities using our humanity as a model is something we can do?
Yeah. I think humanity and our basic needs can be and try to reach the same goal in that respect.
Excellent. All right, Tony.
Yes.
Give him the mic. So, Tony, we've just met.
Hi, Mark.
Hi. And I know a little bit more about Camo and Terry, but I want you to talk about communities that you relate to.
Mark, I relate to all the communities. When you say that, it's just the environment I'm in. If it has healthy structure or not, because I've been around so many communities.
Okay, bring it close to you.
Constantly on the move. I'm always moving from here to there. I'm always moving. So when I'm in a community, I look for the constructive area and the areas that aren't constructive, so I know my boundaries. You know, and the collaboration of trying to make those communities work together in unison without it being toxic or sinful, however you want to call it.
Toxic's a good word.
Yeah, that's a safe word, but I can remember growing up in a toxic community. But what I had seen as I was growing up as a child, my mom had me in a wholesome community where there was a lot of humanity and fellowship. And to make that collaborate, there's going to have to be some moral respect. There has to be a social comfortable ability, and that has to be developed slowly and trusting. And there's some untrusting areas there. For that to develop, that's part of the solution, is how to develop that. And it usually comes through sometimes the religious church or a part of the community that's structured well. If it's the YMCA, Boys and Girls Clubs, and good, wholesome families in the home that are familiar with, how do you say it? Social moral care. Like there's a family that was in my neighborhood and all their kids were well structured and well mannered. And when they came out and they played with us and other kids, they could always slow down the games to make sure everybody was doing everything in a decent manner where it wasn't inappropriate conversations that kids have and wasn't unnecessary verbiage, if you know what I mean. This task you ask of, resilient communities thrive. We choose to live and we choose to live together. And there's going to have to be some healthy boundaries,
There has to be some overcoming of labels and divisiveness too.
It does have to be that. What it takes for that is that takes some acceptance. And then it's the action on both behalves.
Do you think accountability plays a role in that too? Because I heard respect, and which is really and I've heard a lot of really good things that you've talked about, but I kept not hearing an accountability.
Accountability is fair. It's a good word, but it's like accountable to who?
Well, to each other. Because you're in a community together.
But when you say accountable, it's like we're at a state of the nation where the kids want to rebel against accountability towards authority, and it's like, okay, if we didn't have the authority, how would we carry face? That was my whole thing,
How do we live together if we don't have A, accountability, and B, a group of, authority to me is a group of rules we have agreed on to live together.
Mark, better than that. If there was no authority, how would we live together in a wholesome structure? So we wouldn't have that unnecessary conflict. How can we remove the toxicity of the
What if the
areas that are
authority?
pollution, the
But
areas
what if
that are
the
Hold on,
authority
let me
becomes
finish,
a-
man.
okay,
You got
sorry.
me started.
No, go for it. Sorry.
You know,
I apologize.
and I'm not
Please.
gonna do a conspiracy, but there's areas where we're polluted with toxicity of chemicals, and that's like we got to get that out of the area. You know, we got to, some of those areas where what I like about Seattle compared to California that I've seen is that I've seen Seattle shut down at night. A lot of the communities they go to sleep at night. At 9 o'clock we go into bed. And I've been in cities where they just up all night, and it's like I'm not going out there. I'd like to come home, get my rest, and get up and go about my day the next day. And hope to goodness that it's another good day. My whole thing right now, Mark, is the objective towards the resilient community is going to thrive. There's got to be an objective. Which direction are we going?
And I think that gets developed by the people involved in the community.
Yeah.
I think together they
That
have to
still ain't
determine
telling me
that.
where we're going. It's like we're in a mystery of hope. And
So
a hopeful hope, a structured hopeful hope, but it's not, a healthy direction.
but what if you're one of the people that bring the pieces of the puzzle together to determine what the picture looks like?
Oh man, I'm not trying to be all that. I'm a part of. I don't want to be.
But exactly. But you're
You
a
know?
part of. But you come to it, and the part of that you've seen and the experiences you bring to the table help determine where we need to go.
I'm just helping see the variables so we use healthy caution.
That might be the piece of the puzzle you bring.
That's the key thing. We have to be aware of some things because certain situations may happen if they're not avoided.
That may be the piece that you bring.
I've seen that in civilian. I've seen it in military. I haven't worked corrections to know. I hear their stories, but that's a whole nother entity.
It is.
What else we got?
So I'm going to ask for a 4-minute intermission here. Marwan?
Yes.
Because I kind of like you to join us out here.
I can do that.
Okay.
Do you need an intermission to do that?
Huh?
Do you need an intermission to do that?
No, I just wanted to know if,
Oh, yeah, I can
yeah,
come over
okay.
You can be at Marwan. I'm gonna move.
Are you gonna move?
Well, I'm gonna adjust so we can work this. That's all. I'm just gonna
Come sit
adjust.
next to you.
Okay. You want the inside or outside chair
I
spot?
take the outside.
Okay. No, I'm gonna extend it. I'm gonna extend it. I'm gonna get right over. So, go Marwan, go.
So what's the question? What we talking about here?
Okay, so we've been talking about your experience with communities. Each person's brought a little bit of what it is that's like a real connected community. What does that look like to you? We've talked a little bit about it, but
A really connected community. So I met,
that you have been a part of. You have personal experience of being part of.
so what I'll say is I'm a part of many communities, right? This is a community here. G2 is a community. Working with the folks in some of our different podcast shows with Deborah Jackson and Conduit and Martika and Christina. That's a community. So what I would say is I'll reflect on that community because I tell this story often. When I met Deborah and Akuye, that meeting was a meeting that was really centered around wanting to know who I was and trying to figure out where I was coming from, right? Folks had assumptions and ideas in their mind based on what they heard or what people told them, and they wanted confirmation. And so I was grateful that they wanted to at least provide the opportunity for me to either confirm or deny what they heard or what they thought, right? The perceived notion. And so Christina joined us in that as she was kind of the linchpin of knowing each person and could, hopefully facilitate a positive experience, however it turned out. And so they had some critical things to ask of me at that time. And so I didn't know quite what I was walking into. But what was powerful about that was by the end of it, not only did I get a chance to quell, the misnomers and, was able to clear up, what they thought and misconceived notions and, why I ran G2 as I did and just lots of things like that. They ended up wanting to come down after we met for 2 hours. Typically people have places to go and things to do. We're like, yeah, we'd love to come down to your office and take a look at your office. So they came down, they looked at the office. And from that, Akuya and Christina left. Deborah and I talked in the parking lot a little bit more. And then that's what started the larger podcast. And so, twice a month, we actually started a studio audience with like 18 people in the audience, 10 people on the actual podcast. And so this is how this happened, right? And so that was born organically. And that was a community that developed from being able to have grace, patience, putting aside ego, allowing others to express themselves, not listening, not hearing to jump in and defend, but allowing people to talk and explain and get out what they were thinking, right? And then not taking that personally. And so, I asked you about when you're going to talk about the 4 agreements, because not taking things personally is important, right? They didn't know me. So it wasn't about me, right? It was about their perception of me. And so if I didn't extend that grace, then how would they have the opportunity to get to know me? And because I was able to do that, and they were able to do that as well, then it turned into something more, which now we had the 9/11 commission, the 20-year anniversary. And then the emergency management was centered around that, which you ended up coming on the podcast, although I had been in one of your events once before. And then that turned into, me joining, the Kids Have Resilience Project. And the name is
Resilient Ecosystems.
Thank you. Camo's got an acronym for it. Reseco. Yes, that's what's in my name. Plus, I had to.
By the way, folks, that's reseco.org if you want to look at the website.
Reseco.org. Absolutely. And so that is how community can spread. That's how relationship can spread. And that's how sustainability, which I've already told the story, of me removing the word sustainability from my vocabulary and talking about resiliency. That's the resiliency of community, right? So that opportunity, being willing to meet, being willing to extend grace, being willing to listen, turned into, the podcast growing in a way that I wasn't planning on, right? And then that turned into, Martitha coming on and the 9/11 piece. And then that turned into Mark coming on and then me joining you guys. And so that's, to me, an example of community, of effective community for sure.
So what you're actually saying, if I'm hearing this correctly, is you're part of a lot of micro communities that seem to be coming together into a greater community.
Absolutely. Because we're very much siloed off, and that doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing, right? We all have our individual things. I'm not going to start hopping trains. As great as that sounds pretty terrifying, but they have their synergies and they, leverage their knowledge, skills, and abilities in that way. And I leverage mine in my way. But then how can we come together and then expand that? And I think more of that needs to happen as we go forward, because it's time now, right? We're doing the work, but we could do the work so much more profoundly and get great economies of scale if we work together and find that common ground.
Excellent. So, and I'd like you to stay on this side of the camera for a little while, because
Sure.
we're going to do something a little different tonight. So we've been working on the 3 workshops on perspective. And it's been interesting from my point of view, because I have to come into these, they're really largely unscripted. I have an outline of what I want to go through, but I can't walk into a group of people that I don't know and not figure out where they are, because they're going to come in from all different perspectives. And for people to come together and start talking in community, I have to meet them where they are and bring them into where we are. And that makes it a challenge. And this is the first of this workshop series in this format. And so the first 2 have been really challenging in some ways. But I'm finally getting to the juicy part, the part that I find is the first step toward really gaining perspective. And when you think about it, perspective is the ability to see beyond what you expect to see, to ask the next question, to be able to see the panorama ahead of you instead of just the road right in front of your steps. And sometimes resiliency perspective happens when you imagine. And in order to actually be perspective, you have to be able to imagine. And I don't know who said this originally. I'm pretty sure I'm not the first one to say this, but I'll take credit for it if no one else does, is that before you can create, you have to first imagine. If you can't imagine it, you can't build it. And that's just true. Nobody can.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
I just saw a picture of 2 different shipping containers, and there was one a little off the ground, and then one, 90 degree to it on top of it, hanging off and by stilts, and just some of it was cut out, and just by looking at it, you're just like, what is that? But then the picture under it has this beautiful little tiny house, huge windows. It's like up off the floor with this cute little patio around it. And it says, not everybody's going to see your vision. And I love that because I've been building a stage for a year. And at first it was like falling apart camper trailer. And
now it's a really cool stage.
Yeah, it is.
All right. So this is not going to be good podcast material, unfortunately. So I don't know, I'm going to leave it to Marwan to figure out how we're going to do the cut and splice on this. But I'm going to give you guys a picture to work on.
Okay.
And I want you to take a few minutes and we can cut this. We will say there will be a few moments of meditation here and thought, and we will be back to you shortly.
Well, here's the thing. The audience can do it too. So,
okay.
Participate.
So,
to that end, Banjo is on. So Banjo can answer questions. The audience will be able to hear it. We just won't be able to hear it.
Okay.
So Sabrina will have to articulate that out.
And Marwan brings up a very interesting point. If people are following through with this and actually participating in the workshop, which I had not considered because this is all new to me. So I'm going to give you guys a picture, a challenge. And I want you to imagine for a few moments about it. And then the folks here are going to share their vision of what came out of that exercise. Tony?
Sir.
You will be part of that too. So focus. This is going to be the question.
Okay.
Yes, Tony.
Okay. So I want you guys at home, participating at home, to write it down and think about it afterwards, because we're going to build on this. So one thing I can tell you from the last few years of doing this, nobody disagrees that we have problems that need to be addressed. All right. I talk about the dominoes, I talk about Cascadia Rising and everything else, but really the hope to come out of this is that we have connected communities of people that learn how to work together, that actually learn how to care about each other, that can create a better world. When we say resilient communities thrive, it's because they're working together to create the world they want, not the world we have. So going back to the statement that we cannot build it if we can't imagine it, guess what we're going to imagine? I want you guys to be able to tell me in a few minutes a short story about what a better world looks like for you. And I wanted to keep it local. What does a better neighborhood look like? Let's just start with neighborhood. What does a better neighborhood look like to you? And so I want you to take and I'm going to grab my clock. Hold on. I want you to take the next 5 minutes and think about that. And I want you to give some serious thought to it. What does...
Are we still on break?
No, relax. They're gonna do the visioning also.
So what does a better neighborhood look like to you? And go. 5 minutes, think about it, imagine it, go crazy with it. And we're back.
Dun, dun, dun.
So we're going to start with the person behind the mic or behind the camera at this point. Or are we?
Ready?
You ready to talk about your perfect world? Nope, we'll come back to her.
Imagine.
So we're going to start with Camo.
Of course.
Hey, U.S. reading style. Okay.
Left to right. Yes, the perfect world. My neighborhood. I'm actually brought back to. So I live in Southworth, and it's right next to the ferry. It's just 7 miles out of town, Port Orchard. And we live in my grandmother's house, and we inherited it from her. And and I got a job at the Southworth grocery store. And my first day, I was rewarded, and I'd say it's the whole time I worked there was worth just this one day and this one interaction. My very first day, I met a gentleman who said, "Where do you live? You know, what house you in?" And I told him where I live, and he said, Your grandma would bring me. She would give us trees and flowers and stuff." And he said, "I got some apple trees from her in our yard still, and her husband would sharpen my saw." And so that's kind of what I'm remembering in my neighborhood, and imagining, rather, not remembering, but like thinking that it was at one point, you know, the neighbors talk to each other more and weren't all in home on their screens. But I'm imagining kind of like a festival scene too, where there's just kids running around, and you know, I'll walk barefoot down to the beach anyway, but I can imagine it being safe for my son too, without me, with our dogs too as well. You know, the ferry traffic is what it is, but I imagine them going slower. Many people are killed out on that road, including my stepfather, by people going too fast and trying to catch a ferry. So I'd imagine everybody going slower and taking their time, more people out on the streets. I imagine with the kind of festival world where, you know, kids are running around, and then there's, you know, where it's like you come home when the lights go on, you know, outside, you know, that kind of feel. But also, you know, you go to Susie's house on the block and all the kids get to hang out there. And that's kind of where, you know, the kids are doing their own thing, and the parents are working together to build each other's houses or to give each other, you know, trade goods. There'd be less driving. I'm imagining less traffic because there's more to do around the neighborhood. There's gardens being built. And it's kind of the same scene that I imagine in the question that you asked. What was the government? What was the question?
Okay, so the Indian question last week, and I'm glad you brought that up because we are going to get to that tonight, is what does a constitutional democracy look like if it doesn't have a political element?
Yeah, so I'm kind of like imagining no 9-to-5s, you know, it's a similar thing with this, this institution. You know, I'm looking at the White House there's people running around everywhere, you know, there's things to do everywhere. And, you know, all of the big scaffoldings in the White House that are just, you know, the expensive things that were brought in, they're being brought back out, and they're being bit by bit, piece by piece, sold off to the highest bidder. And then all of the funds given out to the individuals and the people who need it, you know, stuff like that. But in our own cities, it's stuff like that where we're working together to help each other build a community and a park. And, you know, old man George down on Beach Drive, you know, he can't build his house on his own, so he had to sell his house, even though he wanted a community garden there. Real life story, real issues that I would love to be a part of, but I can't do myself. I can't go help him, and I can't go fix his house for him. I don't have the time myself, and we're all struggling by ourselves to build our own dreams or just to get by. And I imagine that in my own community, we have everything that we need. I don't need to ever get in my car again because someone somewhere is going to be able to provide me what I need, and then I can give them what they need. So I see busy bodies everywhere. I see less traffic. I see more people running around and more things being built and more action, less stagnant, you know.
Terry?
I actually live in a community of federally subsidized housing. they're very nice apartments. Actually, they're all one level. They used to be old Navy housing, so apartments at one level is awesome because you don't have anybody above you, and don't have anybody below you. But that's the thing, you don't see each other as often because you're not passing by their door, going up and down the stairs and stuff. So I would like to see a community building just in there. There isn't one. And in my perfect world, we would all get together and share food in this community building. Yeah, everybody would get together and really have a good time when they eat together.
I like it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I always thought I did think about flying cars too. Yeah, yeah, definitely got to have flying cars. Yeah,
Flying
Yeah.
cars.
mm-hmm. Oh yeah, we should have flying cars a long time ago.
Neighborhood.
Right, Mark?
So I do want to say that we will be talking about flying cars, innovation and technology in the second series of the workshops.
Yes.
Our neighborhoods go vertical.
And then everybody has each other's back, basically, and everybody knows who the nurse is or the doctor is or who the one that can fix the pipes or who's the one that can, grow the garden or gardens, I love the garden. Yeah. Basically, yeah.
Who's the guy that can install a toilet?
Right? Everybody's got a knack.
Who's the guy that'll change the toilet?
Yep.
Install it versus like an outhouse where you like had to maintain it, maybe. Maintenance
Maintenance the
versus
toilet.
just installation.
The shovel work.
Yep. Like your Star Trek economy.
Not
Mhm.
mine, but Gene Roddenberry's, yes.
Yes. Like
do you
Gene
have, electric
Roddenberry's
toilets?
No,
Star Trek,
We'll talk about that in session 2 too.
right?
Yeah. So Tony,
I don't have one. I like that question. Because I've heard the talk, a perfect world. I don't know. I've dealt with so much oppression and opposition that I've never even thought about a perfect world. I was just trying to figure out how to get through the day.
well, give me 5 elements that you would like to see in your neighborhood. If everybody would do what you think they should do, what would that look like? You said some of them earlier, so I'm expecting
I did have some of them earlier, but you said a perfect world. And I never imagined a perfect world, in all honesty. I can't see it because I've dealt with so much opposition that I've learned how to articulate through so much adversity and diversity, and keep my feet moving.
I think the initial question was a better world. So if a perfect
better
world is
world.
harder to imagine, I would start with a better world.
I would say a more loving world, but that would sound like alphabet soup, if you know what I mean. And I don't mind a loving world. Don't get it wrong, But I would just I just that question just kind of like, wow, that's a
How about honest world?
amazing question. I don't have one like that.
Well,
I know, but not like that, Terry. I'm being sincere with you. I don't have one like that. When I think of a perfect world, Mark, I don't see it being perfect because there's always going to be that one idiot that makes a mistake.
Yeah.
And it's going to have to be addressed.
let me spin this a little bit for you.
Go for it.
What would you think if you could provide a better world for people around you? What elements do you think you should have to do that? Make it more personal.
What elements I should have to do that? Fire, water, wind, earth, air. That's the 5 elements. Let me think.
Loving, honesty. What could you pass on to people around you?
Sincerity.
Sincerity.
Yeah. Compassionate sincerity. When you have to talk from the soul, you have to carry the message from the soul to the generations of the kids. And it has to be positive construct. You have to leave a positive affirmation, something that's heartfelt, that's worth something, of understanding, of social love. That's deep, because I've had family members where it would slow me down to keep from being so wild when I was young, and they would sit and they'd talk to me with healthy concern and a lot of love. It would be directed, but it wouldn't be a yelling or screaming. But that type of communication where it's like you're talking to the soul, you're not just talking to the mind or trying to catch the emotion and captivate them. It's like you really want this to sink in, because they're going to have to carry it down through the years and pass it to the next generation.
Could I jump in there real quick,
Pretty
Tony?
please.
What came to my mind when you were saying there's always going to be that one idiot who messes up, right?
Yes.
And that was where you went, and that was where I was going, and then it jumped right in with and something that I just looked into recently. I came across, it was just kind of like a meme, and it had a picture of some African gentleman like crying and going through it, and it said Ubuntu, you are you because I am me. And it said, I tried to look into it, so I don't know the facts on it, but other than just this one meme and what it said they did, but it said in some tribes in South Africa, they someone would make a mistake, someone would do something wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and then they would gather the village and they would all tell them good things about that person. So when somebody makes a mistake, instead of yelling, they bring them together to bring them up. Because when somebody makes a mistake, it's because they're going through something and they need that support. So I can see that in a better world with your sincerity. It's there where somebody's not doing something good, instead of, okay, come on, we need to do this better. It's you're doing great. You're doing great. You're awesome. It's great.
I like that, because as we've looked at the defect, the character defect, we've also looked at the character attributes and said, stay over here on this side and work these tools, instead of where you're making a mistake over here and causing a problem. I really appreciate that, so it keeps them moving in a direction that's more constructive for the community.
So, yeah, and to back you up
Thank
a little
you.
bit on that, there's a book by a lady named Jane Leadloff about a South American tribe called the Yanomamo. And they very much had that kind of attitude. Matter of fact, when somebody left the tribe and went into the world and got broken because the world was not supportive, and they came back to the tribe, the person would often sit in front of their hut, and the tribe would feed them and take care of them. And they would sit there for as long as it took before they could reintegrate into the tribe. And then suddenly one day they would stand up and go help the tribe do the things that the tribe needed to do. And that was how the Yanomamo worked. And I remember that for a long, long time. I've remembered it ever since the book came out, that that if we were in community together and we supported each other and we gave each other space to grow and helped redirect people, so that energy that made them the idiot in one thing suddenly makes them the pillar in another. So, and Marwan, talk to us, man. Tell us what's going on.
Well,
What's your better neighborhood?
Well, that's a good question. And my first thought did go to Gene Roddenberry Future, right? Where folks can do what they want to do and whatnot. But I actually went backwards. And, I grew up in Seattle, and I was 12 and 13. For folks, let me see if I can kind of compare it to here. I lived in the Rainier Beach area, which was the south side of Seattle. And I would get on a bus, public bus, with my 3 siblings and take them to Catholic school all the way across town in the Central District. And that was safe for us to do. I'm 12, they're younger. We could also ride our bikes down Rainier Avenue, and we're talking about maybe 7 or 8 miles at least, right? And it was safe. There was no light rail down MLK back then. And but people knew us throughout the city, throughout Columbia City and Mount Baker and stops in between. And so there was a community raised us, the church was more involved back then. People could discipline us in the church. My dad trusted those folks, It wasn't a thing of, don't put your hands on my kid or don't talk to my kid like that. So everyone was respected. And so it was just a different time, and we were safe. We didn't ride the bus or run around in public in fear of being snatched up or getting into a fight or being in danger. I mean, kids did what kids did, but it was that good natured lean on me fun, right? You know, and so that is what I would see as the vision and the dream, right? And I know that my daughter now doesn't have that. I wouldn't want my daughter to be outside and walking, a half a mile or 2 miles to school on her own. That's dangerous, right? There's no telling what can happen to her. Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. Well, but or hit and run, right? I mean, there's an uptick here in Kitsap County of that, right? So it's just not safe. People aren't good stewards of each other. So when you said, pull it back and then make it, the neighborhood, that's what triggered me. And, I'm thinking about, Layla and what her experience is now and how my experience was when I was growing up and how free that was. And not to say that bad stuff didn't happen, growing up in the late 80s and the early 90s. Because, I mean, things were happening, but not to the clip that they were, right? And I didn't know any kids. We knew a ton of kids that, were in trouble or in danger and got snatched up or something happened or whatnot. And so we can play in our neighborhood. We had the neighborhood. We were the neighborhood house. We had a basketball court, very traditional neighborhood with blocks. And all of the neighborhood kids would come and play at our house. And so everybody knew who we were. So we couldn't walk anywhere. We went to the 7-Eleven and played video games once we had some quarters or the nickel candies. And it was safe.
Yeah, and you couldn't get away with anything.
No, you couldn't get away with anything, right? But that was good.
Yeah.
You were safe, right? Folks were looking out for you. So for me, that is what I envision, right? I'm going to make it kind of micro and not macro in that way, and just look at it from that lens.
So before we swing over to Sabrina, I want to point out something here. I had a very similar experience to Marwan growing up. I was raised in San Bernardino, California in the 50s and 60s. And I could walk anywhere. I used to walk miles. And when I was 7 years old, I used to walk miles and miles and miles up into the hills of Wildwood Park and up toward Lake Arrowhead. No one would watch us or know where we were, but we would be together and we would do that. When we walked around the neighborhood, everybody knew us. The service station manager, the Italian restaurant owner, the guy at the corner store, everybody knew everybody. And here's the more important point. It was 1/3 of the population that we have now. We have tripled our population since the 1950s. And so when you think about the crazy things that we did as kids when we were learning how to drive, and we watch the people doing it now, and I think of how stupid they are, I think, whoa, back up, Mark. You did the same exact thing. Two differences. One, I did it on a dirt road where there were no people. And two, there weren't that many people on the road at that time. Nowadays, doing something dumb or doing something show-offy in your car can kill somebody in a heartbeat. Population is a real thing, and it has tripled in our lifetimes. And that's something that's just a reality, especially when you think about fixed resources on a planet and tripling the population. And that can just be crazy. So, Sabrina, did you give some thought to it? What does a better neighborhood look like to you? Do you need Camilla? You want to give her the mic?
Yep, I sure do. My imagination to a perfect neighborhood or a world would be everybody would be healthy, happy, caring, giving. A lot of what you guys are all saying, sharing food, in a home, safe. I just see lots of people on the street lately. And yeah, healthy as in like mental illness. the things that I see, I don't know, nowadays it's sad. I mean, growing up, I was out there, but I probably shouldn't be out there because things, not as you guys are saying, everybody was there for each other. I don't know, just a happier world. Definitely.
So I want to point something out right now, which is kind of at the core of what the Kids Resiliency Project is about and the core of these workshops. I'm listening to everything you guys are saying. No one here talked about skin color. No one here talked about education or politics. Talked a little bit about religion in the church, but more as a round of community, not as a right or wrong or one right way. And in the thousands, and I do mean literally thousands of conversations I've had with people all over this planet, that's a universal truth. When it comes right down to what we all care about and we all want in our lives, none of that matters. What matters is people who care, breaking bread, health, someone having your back.
I did like the education part though, because I threw in that there's definitely a little bit of education there because people got to learn. If you don't learn, then there's no.
Yeah, well,
Except
actually,
the controversial parts of education, I think, of where you're going. But
yeah, the fact that education is actually used as a differentiant for class system as opposed to a body of education, and actually that was designed into our education system in the 1900s by the industrialists who funded it and pushed for it to happen and created compulsory education. It was created to create workers, not people who think.
right, yeah. And for me, education is like go down to Susie's house on the block so you can learn about what plants you can eat from.
Right.
Stuff
Or
like
going
that.
to Terry's house and learning how to play guitar, or any number of things. How we really learn, not how we are taught in schools, which is the antithesis to actually learning. Well, I'm sorry, Tony. What?
Antithesis.
I didn't know what that word meant. That's why.
The opposite, the exact opposite of what is real.
Okay,
Sorry, I do that sometimes.
that's all right.
You're
Huh?
you're educating us. That's okay.
Okay, so we see that we want a better world, and again, in the second session of the workshops, we really get into the nuts and bolts of how we got here and some of the things that have created this, and we can start talking about ways out of it. But you'll find from this point forward, using your imagination to see a difference, a way to make a difference, is going to become more and more important. And Tony, imagination is like a muscle. You have to exercise it to develop it. And everything in our system has pushed us not to develop our imagination. Because if we can develop our imagination, we develop a better way to do it. And in a hierarchical system, the top of the hierarchy doesn't want you to imagine a better way to do it because it might not include them.
No, it's my ignorance. I won't read. Reading develops creativity for the mind. I'll watch a TV show.
But so does experience.
Yeah, but I'll watch a TV show. I experiences very well. I'll just read information that's going to keep me of sound mind. But to elaborate on free reading also, it develops a creativity for the mind to create. And the more I keep not reading, the less I'll be academically sharp to probably be that creative part you're talking about. Because I have to deal with certain realities. That's going to be my own fault.
Well, I do recommend that you get a copy of Ishmael audiobook, which is how Camo and Banjo are getting through it. So if you're not comfortable reading a lot, some people aren't, and I get that. Do the audiobook because there's going to be information in that you're going to need. Okay. And bear with it because the gentleman creates a fictional character to use as a foil, a way to tell a story about how humanity developed from an outside point of view. It's a useful tool to get us to actually understand how pieces come together.
It's kind of hard to read, like, just reading the book because you're you're going back and forth between two individuals for the entirety, or at least as far as we've gotten. And so it's very much like, oh ha. So
I
it's
can do
hard to
that.
differentiate.
I
But
do reading, I do some
yeah.
acting, but see, when I read, I'll start fabricating in my mind on how to take over the world like a politician. I don't want to go there.
This is not that. This tells you how the politicians took the world over.
Were they reading?
This guy tells a story about how it happened.
Thank you. I'll get the book.
You should.
I already have that book. It's in my storage. My brother had it in his collection of books.
Yeah, it's an important one because we're going to be going over that right away in the next session. And this is the last session, the last workshop of the first session. We actually get into the nuts and bolts in the next section, and Ishmael's the first thing we're going to talk about. The second thing we're going to talk about, and actually moving into the third session, is going to be where we really get into the Miguel Ruiz's 4 agreements. And I will tell you that, a lot of people read it, look at it and go, oh, Toltec wisdom, and they go woo woo, and they don't want to hear it. Ignore all of that. We're going to be talking about just the 4 agreements. We're not going to be talking about Toltec mythos. We're not going to be talking about religion or any of that other stuff. We're going to be talking about the actual agreements themselves, and we're going to peel them away like an onion. And we're going to explore them in depth and understand why we should own these 4 agreements in any community we develop. Because these agreements will help us relate to each other by being the best self we can be. So that's coming up starting next time. I developed these, and this is the thinking behind them. And I've had several people that have been at the workshops ask me for the syllabus or the manual or the direction to do this.
Yeah.
And the thing is that there isn't one. And I'll quote a song right now, and I can quote actually probably 6 or 7 songs, but I'll quote one by The Who from the rock opera Tommy. It's I'm Free. It's when Tommy comes out and suddenly can hear and see again. I don't know if for those of you who don't know the story, Tommy is a deaf, dumb, and blind kid who plays pinball, and he's known as the Pinball Wizard. And at one point he gets his sight and hearing back, and he sings I Am Free. And there's a line in there that goes, so many times, it has happened so many times before that messiahs have pointed to the door and nobody had the guts to leave the temple. Nothing that we're going over in these workshops is new. Nothing about this is any different than we have known in parts of our humanity throughout our history. But we get distracted by all of these different things, and all this is bringing us back to being human. It's the whole point of the workshops, is about re-attaining our humanity and focusing on creating a future based on our humanity instead of our profit or divisiveness.
Banjo just mentioned. Oh, did I have this on? Yeah, Banjo was just texting me as he's watching, and he's saying that nobody mentioned money as we were talking about our perfect
Nobody
worlds.
mentioned money, not a person. It's absolutely true. So the reason we do perspective first is because unless you gain a different perspective or start gaining the ability to see things in a different way and see a broader world and a broader way of seeing things, you're never going to change your ability to do things. It kind of like builds into the imagination. This may be only my thing, but the second session of the workshop is about how we got here, because I think everybody can do better in creating and understanding and driving to create communities and connected communities if they understand what happened to get us here. I think that once you know the why and the how, you can see a different way to go. So perspective, how, and then we start working into grassroots and connecting. And the fourth section, the last 3 workshops are all about learning how to connect to other people and have the same conversations. That's how this was developed. So any questions? I mean, I don't want anybody I mean, people come here for different reasons, but I want people to understand why we do what we do and why we're doing it this way. And no, there isn't a manual. At some point there will be a book, but quite honestly, I cannot finish writing the book until I do the workshops and we figure out some things. And this is what we're doing right now. And believe me, everyone here is helping change the world. Even you, Tony.
Can I jump in? So we just received some books from Grandma that she's been holding on to, for Jethro, our son, and we, there's a lot about the presidents and our history and they're older books. She's a teacher, so it's kind of, hand-me-downs and all that. And so we're looking through the books and trying to figure out which ones are going to be of most benefit. And and the first one that I see that I'm least of a fan of was the presidents, a book about the presidents. And my brother loved it, and he knew all of them by name, and he memorized them, and and he wanted to join the military. That's why I'm camo, right? But I, on the other hand, not interested. And the only reason I would want to is because, the phrase history repeats itself keeps coming to mind, and I'm very much a believer that the way things are working are not working. And
you mean the way things aren't working?
The way things aren't working is not working. And and so we're trying to find that new way of thinking, but we need to know where we came from. And as we're reading this book, it's like a kid's way of getting to know the presidents, and the first page is like, did you know that 7 presidents' names started with John or James, and these ones had, similar names. And then you go on to these ones had these kind of pets, and these ones came from this background. And it talked about, like, one page was, the 2 got kicked out, and that was about it. Somebody broke their knee in battle. It really didn't give any information. And Jethro was like, no, why don't we, the thing that I'm trying to take into consideration is that this doesn't mention any of the things that they did bad. And I said, well, what about the things they did good? And they did have a page on that. And we found 2 presidents that were interested in looking to see what they did good. But it was like, the whole book was just like, why are we learning this? And I am looking at all of that by how can we do something different this time?
2 words.
Yeah.
Schoolhouse Rock.
Yeah.
Gives the same information, but it's a musical.
Yeah. Yeah. We recently watched Hamilton as well.
Yeah.
And that was after being just like, you gotta watch it. You gotta watch it. You gotta watch it. If you guys haven't watched it, you have to watch it now because we were forced to watch it and it was amazing. And I referenced it many times when we were reading these books. It's Hamilton. It's very beautiful. It's a musical, and it's a beautiful representation, and you learn a lot about history. I had no idea that any of this happened.
So my favorite quote of all time, and if you guys follow me on Facebook, you'll see this pop up periodically. It's by a Spanish philosopher from the 1950s called George Santayana. And of all things, I heard it first. The first time I ever heard this was as a reference on a science fiction TV show called Babylon 5. And George Santayana said, those who do not remember the past are destined to repeat it. Mm-hmm. And we teach history in schools in such a way that is the most boring, horrific subject on earth.
It's not even
by the
horrific.
way, it's full of all kinds of really bad facts that aren't connected to anything else. And history in itself is this juicy, living story of humanity. Mm-hmm. And it's not taught that way.
No. It was awesome and triumphant. We did great, and everybody was a hero.
My worst subject.
Yeah, I think that anybody, say, there's an author, fiction author named Lindsay Davis. She is brilliant researcher and historian. And she writes a series about Rome during the time of the three emperors from a perspective of a person in Rome that is absolutely eye-opening to understand what was going on in Rome and the politics and the craziness there. So I'm going to shift just a second. Let me check time. Okay, yeah, this is the time to shift. So we're going to talk now a little bit about the challenge from last week. And I'm going to start off with this talking about the books that you got. Did you have a copy of the Constitution in those books?
Yeah, we do have like a breakdown of it.
Do you actually have the Constitution itself?
I used to. We broke it down in school, but
Okay.
But we do not, and that's something that I have been wanting to do.
How many people in this room actually have a copy of the Constitution of the United States? Have like the little book or a copy of the Constitution of the United States? Sabrina, you don't?
I did about 2 years ago.
You have a copy of the Constitution?
It's in my military notes.
Okay.
I've got like a stack of military books, and I remember they gave us this one book on a deployment, and that was one of the main
Okay.
things our sergeant major.
So I'm going to give a reading assignment for the second workshop in the next series. I want you to read the Constitution of the United States. It's actually a fairly easy read, but everybody should read that because we will be talking about it and how it is actually quite a brilliant piece of work. It's the politics around it that screwed everything up. So here's a question for you. And this is to help you to us address this question. Have the Senate and the House of Representatives always been professional politicians?
Are you okay? Are you on CPR?
Did you guys realize that at one point for a very long time that you went off to serve as a senator or a congressman and came back and went back to your job that you had, and that you were representing the people because you were one of them?
That's beautiful.
That's how the Constitution was written. And then we changed it so that we had professional politicians that stayed in office for 40 years.
It was like jury duty.
Yeah, it was exactly like jury duty. People went off to Congress to represent the people for a short period of time and then went back to their work, and they weren't paid. It was required. It was like in Israel, you are in the military because it's part of your citizenship. So people were elected to go to Congress to represent the people. And then at some point in history, we changed it to be professional politicians.
Money.
And I will tell you, without naming the politician, I will tell you I know one today that left school, went into local bureaucracy, ended up going to state representation, went to federal representation, and has never actually had a real job. Not once, not in his entire life. How is he representing us? So let's think about that question I asked last time.
Wow.
Imagine a constitutional democracy without a political element, and what would that look like? So I'm going to start off with you, Tony, because you look like you're mind blown.
No, I'm not mind blown. I'm just amazed on how well he pulled that off.
Oh, going through an entire life without ever having a real job?
And in the position he was at to represent the people when he hadn't been down there working with the people to see what we do, 40 hours a week.
Take a look at the history of most of the House of Representatives, and you'll see that same story.
It's interesting. Because I always remember that one story: give them the same medical care and support that the people get. It'll be a whole different conversation. Just saying.
So if we had representatives that were actually representing us in Congress, that actually worked with us, that knew us, that were part of our lives, would you think that would be more or less political than what we have now?
Less,
Do you think if we
I would think. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
do you think that if we all cared about the same things because we all knew each other and worked together and again represented each other, that the parties would be important, or would the work be important?
The work.
The work.
The work versus the Democratic or Republican, the work that's done.
I think their salary might have something to do with it too.
You know, I don't want to get all negative here, but if you're a congressman, you get health care for life. You get a salary for life. You get immunity from taxes for life.
Yeah.
Get immunity from taxes.
Yep.
too?
Yeah.
They don't pay taxes for the rest of their lives.
Ask 45 about it.
That's fine. We're all just struggling to pay our cell phone bills over here. It's not a big deal.
And yet they can't get a budget approved and have it for decades. So, you know, this is the thing. What does a constitutional democracy look like without a political element? Could it look like what the Constitution was written to be originally?
That's what I was going to ask you, is if they had had that in the Constitution originally to free of taxes rest of your life.
No, well, that developed on because the founders of the Constitution, the forefathers that everybody thinks are marvelous, they couldn't possibly see what these unmitigated weasels, and you can cut that out if you want to, and you can beat me and do that. These unmitigated weasels that we elect could possibly do to their work. The Constitution
Right.
was always supposed to be open-ended, which is why there are amendments to it.
Mm-hmm.
But now we think about it, how would we even possibly get to a place where we can get the representatives and senators to go back to being representatives of the people and stop being professional politicians?
Right.
Because they have the power to say yes or no. And why would they cut their own salaries and their own throats? Marwan, you're thinking awfully hard. I can actually see the wood smoke.
Well,
coming out of your
you
ears.
know, so that's interesting when you said, you know, well, what if? And so, you know, you had us go through an exercise on imagining. So what would it take to do that?
It would take an act of the people coming together and pushing it forward until the people see, we still have the power in this country because the Constitution gives us the power. So if we come together and do a vote by the people to change that, we can make that happen. But that means we don't have to all talk to each other, and we'd have to have connected communities that are all having these conversations about what a better future might look like.
Well, and that's the imagining piece, right? So, you know, we could fix things almost overnight if we were on the same page in that way. Yeah, definitely, you know, Supreme Court justice. I don't think there should be lifetime appointments, any of that. As we stay stagnated, we don't grow with the times. But that's interesting. You know, what would it take to go and make those changes, and for everyone to say, you know what, we're not going to do this anymore. This is what we're going to do, and we're going to wipe everyone out. Not in that way, not literally.
Whoa, Marwan.
Okay,
That'd be one way to solve it.
Black vest with letters on their jackets.
That's the dark coffee there. But we're going to have a reset, right? We re-elect, and this is what it's going to be. And, you know, it's going to be temporary. You're not going to have all these, you know, provisions and everything else that are going to be set there. You're going to come in, you're going to do the work for a little bit, you're going to leave, and someone else is going to come in, and there's going to be so much change that happens that, you know.
And you're going to represent the people.
Right. But then you wonder, well, factions, you know, folks find ways. but I'm trying to be optimistic in a
But if we're connected
pessimistic
communities and
mindset.
we all have a prime directive in our communities, we can keep that from changing too dramatically. And government itself is about preventing change. It's about stability. So if we get people in place and we give them a good foundation to work with, we should be okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is interesting.
So did it seem like that complex a question when I asked it last week, or was it like, I'm not even sure what to think about this?
I think for me it was more, like I said, connecting it to the imagining. Like, that's to see us move in that direction would seem like it would be generations, right? And maybe we come together after a really bad cataclysmic, event where many of us are wiped out by
Like
the billions,
COVID?
or even more than that. I mean, it's minuscule compared to. I'm talking about maybe cutting the population by 2/3 or something like that, and folks are forced to work together in order to survive. And it's like, okay, we're going to do something different. But to think about it in a way where we're going to build the communities that we have. We're going to improve those communities and then start to bring other communities together and then say, okay, guys, we're going to change this, and then start to really have that fundamental change and then see that happen. Can it happen in a generation?
Our project is set for 10 years to get the first movement going. But with the internet and with people interested in seeing this kind of change, we get any kind of traction, it could go viral. So if we get change happening here locally, it could grow exponentially really quickly.
So let me ask a question. How would that be different from, let's say, an Occupy Wall Street or Black Lives Matter that, for a minute had this groundswell and everyone came together, and then after a while it just kind of petered out?
Because the framework has built-in continuity. Now, there's two dangers here, and you've heard me talk about this before. First is the danger of a charismatic leader. Because you get a charismatic leader, we've all seen how that works. I mean, the leader dies or is discredited in some way, real or unreal, and they immediately start spreading, pulling away and co-opting the ideas. The Occupy Wall Street actually is still a powerful movement, though it's not the movement it was with the protests. But this is even more so because you're creating connected neighborhoods and then network communities, and you're getting the conversation started and people empowered to understand they have pieces of the puzzle. And the picture you're creating is based on everybody's input, not just a few people's input to get their goals met. It's not a political movement. It's not to destroy something like Occupy Wall Street, to take down Wall Street. It's to build something, to build a resilient foundation and to build resilient communities and to begin a conversation that will go on for generations about how to create a better world. And there are some maps, as we mentioned earlier, the Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek Economy is a great way to go, but you've got to stop this co-opting bullshit of the words of, you start talking about a socialist. You're socialist. Well, do you even know what a socialist is? No. Do you know what a socialist program is? You're communist. Do you understand communism is not the same as democracy? It's an economic system, right? And people say, well, capitalism and democracy, they're the same thing. No, they are not. One is an economic model. One of them is a governmental model. They are not locked together by chains. They are separate. You can have a democracy and have any kind of economic model you want. The fact that we have capitalism doesn't mean it's the best. It means it's what we have. Right. But let's have a conversation that actually explores realities and needs and determine something that works.
You were saying that, what if it just fizzles out? Mm-hmm. Well, I don't see that happening because we're developing tools to empower everybody. School does the opposite.
And I was thinking with BLM, because that whole time, but even before you said that, I was thinking about that because we went down to Portland and we have, friends of friends who's gotten shot in the armpit and gas in their apartments just from living near it. And, my aunt's boyfriend's business was, I think everything was stolen out of it in downtown Portland. And, just everybody is being affected by it. And with that, I was thinking and thinking and thinking. And by the end of it, I'm just like, there isn't this base of everybody building each other up and Ubuntu. And, we're building the framework and slowly incorporating it to as many people as we possibly can and weaving this safety net. Whereas BLM is just a bunch of pissed off people. And even when we were in the middle of it, it was just so hard to do. Like, even when we were doing the right thing, people were still coming at us because they were, it's like these kids, they were running around and they were trying to stab some random dude. And we're trying to like, hey, come on, like back off. But they're pissed and their parents are there and they don't know where their parents are. And they're just like 12, something like that. And all three of them are causing a ruckus. And we're trying to just like protect this man from getting attacked. And they're just running around in hoodlums because they don't have anything to do. And they don't have that support. Everybody's mad. And even the people, even as we're trying to protect this person or try and provide some sort of like, hey, let me help you children position, we're getting all these people being like, what are you doing? How do I make the situation better? But doing this security guard stance and like they need to protect them from us. And everybody's just like misconstrued and there's no real messages that are going across. And the same thing happened with Chaz in downtown. Chop to Chaz, they had this movement and they had this thing going, but what I think a lot of people were trying to figure out was, what is your message? What do you want out of this? We just want change. And there's just people coming together and we just want change. We just want change. We need change. We just need change, And so I think with this, the difference is we're just framework. We're trying to just change our perspective a little bit. And that's what this first section is about, right? Perspective. Yeah. So we're just trying to see things in a different way. And so once we have that mindset and have the key words and have the different things, like it's not necessarily like, this is what we need to do now. It's that we all need to come together and we all need to be supportive of each other and we all need to, we all
need to listen.
Yeah.
And we all need to find respect. And we all need to tell people to bring their pieces of the puzzle to the table so that we can know what the future needs to look like.
Well, I'm excited to see the framework develop and then, continue to build community. As I said before in the story that I articulated, I can say, years ago, I wasn't consciously working on building community in that way. I was building it in some other ways, and working on the part that I can work on in programs that I was starting and initiating. That's that imagination piece, that I do have, right? I don't know how broad it is, but I will dare to try something. I'm not afraid to fail. So I tell people that I don't lose. I either win or I learn, but I don't lose because I'll always try.
Amen.
Banjo was adding, he said, you make a good point. The difference of something made from sincerity over something made from anger. So, BLM, we're out there and we're pissed off. And here we're just trying to, we're coming from a sincere place.
And the reality is anger and protest can't sustain. You can't keep that level of emotion and anger out. You burn out. But hope is self-sustaining. Bringing people together and letting them have their voice and bring their pieces of the puzzle to the table and help them all learn each other and come to agreements, that has power for lasting. That is capacity. That is continuity going into the future.
That was Obama's campaign slogan, right?
Yeah, the trouble is that he said, yes, we can. And we all heard, yes, I can. And it's your job.
Hope.
Yeah, no, hope is true.
Hey.
But yeah, so this is all about hope. It's all about empowerment. It's all about bringing people to the table. And our hope is that when we go through the workshop series, that there will be some people that can pick it up at the end and start teaching it. And that's how growth happens. Yeah, Tony.
All right.
I predict that you are going to end up being a great teacher.
I work at it at times. I try to carry a constructive message, because the youth is coming up fast and they're highly intelligent with all the management skill tools they can do. They're just spreadsheet for anything and account for every day when you say accountability. And they can move in a constructive direction, but towards what? And for what?
I think that you're going to find the light about what that is, what is, and that's what you're going to teach.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a great teacher already.
I'm just trying to keep them sober. Frederick Douglass said this back in the day when he was sitting on the board. We got to keep the people away from alcohol.
So here's a story that I have. I used to work with folks, helping them with business plans, and I worked with a guy who was putting together his business, and we ended up having a conversation about drug use and about how much drug use it is and how recreational drugs are somewhat out of control. And this is before we all knew it was an opioid addictions that were being produced by pharmaceutical companies or driven by pharmaceutical companies. And he said, so Mark, here's the thing. We are living in a world that is not compatible with our humanity. And people take drugs because it's the only way they have to cope. And I sat back and I thought about it and I went, holy hell, he's right. People aren't taking drugs for recreation. They're taking drugs because they're living in a world that is quite honestly in conflict with their own humanity. They see no future. They don't see a way out of this. And the people who are supposed to be helping them can't or won't. So what do? You have to change the rules. Yeah, Tony.
You said living in a world that is not compatible with what?
Our humanity.
Not compatible with our humanity. This is an interesting way to break that down to be in the solution of when I'm working with these kids or talking to them and they're asking me because they think I'm one of them.
Yep. Bottom line is we are human, but our culture is not.
Yeah, they are.
Our culture as it lives now, our cultural framework as it lives now, does not support our humanity.
They're inspired by something else.
Yeah,
that's all.
They're inspired by their humanity and your humanity. I think our school system is horrific and broken, but I had some fabulous teachers. And the teachers are the only thing that made it worthwhile.
Yeah.
So the brief story, personal story for me. Back in junior high school, I was diagnosed as dyslexic. And at that point in time, this was a long time ago, that was considered a learning disability. And I was put in remedial programs. The time I got to the last year of junior high school, a switch had flipped in my head and words were no longer dancing around the page and letters weren't dancing around. They suddenly were pictures. And the whole world changed for me and I started reading voraciously. I read enormous amounts of books in that final year of junior high school and going into high school. But the remedial was in my file. So I am no longer having an issue with reading or any of those things. Never had an issue with thinking. But for my first year of high school, I was in remedial classes watching slideshows about really inane things because I was dumb and unable to read. Until one of my teachers realized that I was actually outperforming most of the people in my class. And he had a conversation with them and it got me out of the remedial classes. A lot of people don't have teachers like that.
I think everyone's had one or two teachers in their lives that really kept them on track if they were lucky.
Yeah,
Most everyone I talked to has had at least one.
I've been lucky. I had 4 or 5. And not to mention my chemistry teacher, Steve Taylor. Shout out to Steve, whose midterm in chemistry class was making ice cream with hand crank ice cream makers. Because he said that was the ultimate in chemical experimentation.
It really is.
It changes form.
Where's the restroom at?
Oh,
I know it's that.
restroom.
Restroom, yeah.
Yeah, give Tony
Sorry,
the.
I've been
Watch this.
away from
It's okay.
this. We all know where the restroom is, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
it's the Pink Panther key.
Okay.
Just for
Da-dum, 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 da-dum,
That's not a
da-dum.
beat. That's my teeth flow.
Oh,
What?
Tony?
You need the key.
You want
You
the
need the
key, my
key.
friend? Or
otherwise
you're
you'll be
just
standing outside the door.
bang on the door, desperate.
Again.
Yeah.
Tell me you want to join us.
Huh?
You want to join us?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Your words are going unheard.
Oh, that's okay.
All right.
There's plenty of very smart
Banjo,
people.
So-
Banjo begs to differ. He
Oh.
just cast Tom at me. Saying
Oh,
he's
well,
st-
there's
don't
lots
take
of really
the seat
smart
here.
people in this room, so
And you're one of them.
I thank you. That's kind, but I think I'm smarter in this room, so I'm happy to be included.
Well, I'll just swing this around.
Okay. That's all I had to say. So.
Okay. So we're coming up on the end of the evening, and I just wanted to give a chance for anybody here to have questions. Sabrina, that includes you, about where we're heading next. As Ishmael is going to be the next Thursday's topic is going to be Ishmael. We're going to be talking about where that story goes and how we possibly got where we are, and maybe start opening the curtain to see how we get somewhere else.
Clutch.
That's alcohol abuse.
It is alcohol abuse. Damn it. Do you have a copy of Ishmael I can borrow? I have a lot
I
of
do.
fairy time I have to spend this week, so I'll have time to read the book
I'll drop one by tomorrow.
or reread the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've read it, but it's been a long damn time.
Yep, I have a couple copies left.
Okay, and I just want to borrow one.
Okay.
I'll harass you every couple of days. See where you're at.
Oh, have you finished it? Or
No, we're getting there. We were actually we're actually pretty close, I think. So yeah, we'll definitely be done by next week.
I'll dig up my power reading skills from my college days. I read War and Peace in 3 days.
I have faith in you.
I don't remember a damn bit of it, but I read it in 3 days and got through my midterms and quizzes and all that.
Yeah, Terry and I just went on vacation for 4 days down at Grayland, camping in a yurt by the beach, which, by the way, the puppies loved.
Yeah.
And Terry saw me come up for air a couple, 3 times as I started a book by Charles DeLint and finished it before we came home.
Not bad. Not bad.
Yay!
Yeah, War and Peace. That was a grind. That wasn't fun. That was just okay. Get to this section, pass the test. Get to this section, pass the test.
Yeah, I only survived it because I tossed Terry my Kindle with several novellas on it.
Yeah, I finished my book and he says, okay, here. I'm like,
Wasn't my
okay,
favorite
next one.
sexual story.
Next one. Next one.
Yep. So, Tony, any questions before next week?
No, I was kind of intrigued by some of the questions you had. They were pretty good. I just trying to remain small and learn what I can.
Okay,
But
so
you
next
had
week,
thing living in a world that is not compatible with our humanity. I'm gonna chew on thought for that probably the whole week to try to make it fit in with the youngsters that I talk to when we talk with each other.
excellent.
You know, we don't talk at each other. We just try to move in conversation for an
So it's
understanding.
time to go to the storage shed and get the copy of Ishmael because we're going to start talking about that next week.
It's a 10 by 25. I wonder where it's at. You caught that quick, Kelly. Thanks. Yeah.
That's a big storage unit.
You ain't got to tell me. I know what I pay every month, so I'm tracking on that. I'm like, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds like
pretty
me
sure I
with,
know
you know,
what you pay.
My
You know.
business here, my garage at home, the storage unit for the business. I don't know where things
One of the
are.
coaches I was coaching with, he said to me, he says, Tony, how long have you had that storage? And I told him how long I had. He says, you know, you could have brought that stuff 3 times over. I go, yeah, pretty much.
Yep.
And I never knew crow. I don't know if it tastes good, but I know I've ate it. That's about all I got on that.
Gross.
Ketchup.
Ketchup?
Ugh.
Okay. Trust me, in this thing called life, you'll be eating some crow. He's trying to tell you how to season it right.
No ketchup, no mayo.
Whatever.
Salt and
Oh,
pepper.
for sure.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
will
So
never
if you need a
use
copy, I can get one tomorrow one.
Again,
I can get it back to
sandwich
you.
he made
Okay.
me this week.
I got a couple
Yeah.
extra. So
Okay, and I'll make sure Marwan holds me accountable to be reading it because I'll ask him questions about each chapter.
Well, I haven't read it yet.
Oh,
So
no, I
Take your
got
time, Marwan.
14
you know what?
different
You
kinds of
can ask
mustard.
Rob. I'm gonna ask Rob.
We had-
'cause
we
he
had-
reads probably
No,
as
don't
fast
do
as
Rob like that. We gonna read. You gonna be
Rob,
busy.
So here's the deal. Rob
Oh
is
my
gonna be
gosh,
one
on a
who's gonna
sandwich.
be here next week. That week.
Rye bread
So
sandwich.
next
we
week,
made.
this thing is growing so fast. I'm actually interviewing the mayor at the exact same time.
yeah,
You're
that,
busy.
we're at time, I think. So I'm gonna.
You're supposed
I
to say
need to
that
talk
out
to him
loud.
about something that I don't. That is definitely offline of this.
All right. So are you concluding? You want to end the?
Yeah. So I hope you all got something out of this. Next week it's going to get real, and we're going to be talking about history and how we got here. So if you don't have a copy of Ishmael, get a copy of Ishmael. And if I don't see you here, follow along with us on the podcast. And at some point, we're all going to break some bread. So when that happens, I can guarantee you that Tom and I will certainly have some things to say about food that's going to be pretty damn good. And some other people will be joining us. And I think we can have a rocking good podcast and stuff our faces at the same time and show people what getting down with food looks like.
I like it. I like it.
All right. Have a good night.
All right, everyone. We will be back tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. And then, of course, we'll be back next Thursday. So, again, you can give a call to 360-373-3000 if you want to get involved. Mark, you want to leave the contact information if people want to join the workshop?
You can go to Resiliency Rocks on Facebook, and you'll see a link to a form there where you can just let us know who you are, and we'll give you the information you need to know.
All right. I'm Marwan Cameron. This is the Conduit. We will see you next week.